on cooperation. Every day there will be coordination between all health ministers and the Commission to exchange views on the changes in the epidemic and coordinate measures taken in terms of confinement and of freedom of movement and organization of schooling and so on. We have also decided to set up a joint organization, greater coordination regarding equipment. There are two challenges in Europe. There's the masks, the surgical masks for protection. We have spoken about this since the beginning of the epidemic, and the respirators, the artificial respiratory equipment indispensable in emergency services. Italy, in this regard, has had a lot of trouble in recent days. So we have decided to enhance coordination to meet the needs, to make joint decisions, pass joint orders, to limit the shortages and to bring a collective response. The Italian problem has the emergency services in Italy have faced great difficulties. We also decided to set up around the European Commission a scientific council or committee. We have insisted on the fact that the decisions made, which have to be taken in this crisis, must be based on scientific data and on a consensus of scientists. The second aspect, major aspect, regarding the decisions concerns research. We have already spent over 100 million euros on outstanding research programs to accelerate ongoing programs regarding diagnoses, treatment, and vaccinations. We also want European work to intensify. And beyond the decisions already made with the European Commission, we will be fostering new research projects, and we will be defending and supporting our businesses, our public laboratories which are involved in research relating to the virus. We need to shorten the deadlines and to support them with fiscal and budgetary elements. Finally, we discussed the economic and financial consequences of the epidemic. We have already seen over the last few days the responses, the reactions of European markets and global markets, which show a degree of instability, febrility, and worry. We are facing the consequences of COVID-19 at the same time, the destabilization of global markets, particularly tensions on the oil market and decisions which have resulted in a sharp fall in oil prices. This creates volatility and major risks. In the face of all this, there are, first of all, national responses, which we will implement in order to support our health services so that they can meet the crisis, deal with the crisis, but also support all sectors that are affected economically, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises. Each member state will take the decisions that are required in a flexible regulatory and budgetary framework. We have also decided that altogether we are ready to make the necessary decisions, to take the measures indispensable to facing this epidemic and to face all the consequences of this epidemic and to avoid any form of instability, of financial instability and economic instability. So we'll take all measures that are necessary in this regard, and that's what we have agreed on this evening. The European Central Bank will be expressing its views on Thursday, and we will be continuing our exchanges of views on a regular basis. There will be a meeting, a physical meeting of the Council on the 26th of March, and we'll continue this close coordination. Can we hope for a fiscal stimulus by the EU, by Europe? It's our determination, it's our will. We must have responses which are as powerful and as swift as possible. So a consensus has emerged this evening. First of all, there's the response in terms of health. The absolute priority is health, and this health response, and this has a cost. The budgetary constraints of each member state must not prevent us from taking the right decisions regarding health care. Secondly, we must support the most badly affected economic sectors affected by the crisis: the tourist sector, civil aviation, trade, and other sectors which have been impacted by the consequences in Asia and the closures which have been decided and the consequences of this epidemic. We have already taken the preliminary measures, and we will continue to take them to support, to help those sectors and help those small and medium-sized enterprises. On the European level, we have decided to be more flexible in terms of state aid. The sectors that have been affected must benefit from the measures decided. The clauses, all these clauses in the treaty have to be activated so that budgetary and fiscal constraints should not be an obstacle. We absolutely need to support our economies and particularly to support the smaller economic players to avoid the spread of the disease. So it's a united Europe which must take into account the fact that we are experiencing today an exceptional crisis which calls for exceptional responses. Austria and Slovenia have closed their borders with other countries. Some responses are based on national law. Today we have focused on coordination. All measures which are non-cooperative within the EU are not positive. All countries are affected by the crisis. A few weeks ago, we decided to close the borders. When I went to Naples, we said no. If one person or a group of people, one traveler is enough in a particular area, can cause the spread of the disease. Our state of mind since the beginning, our methodology since the beginning is very simple. First of all, let's listen to the specialists, to the scientists, and we mustn't give in to panic. Secondly, to do everything to slow down the spread of the epidemic, because when you slow down, you can organize yourselves better, we can avoid excessive pressure on hospital services and all healthcare services, and we can organize ourselves better. This is what we've been doing for weeks now, and this is what the government is working on. This means that we may have to make closures, and this is where we need greater European coordination. And the response must be proportional. It must be useful. We are only at the beginning of this epidemic. If we take measures that are disproportionate, which we will not be able to live with them. That would be counterproductive. So those would be bad decisions. European coordination which will be much more efficient. Confinement measures in the regions most affected will be more effective. We need to enhance the sense of responsibility of people who are ill and are advised to stay at home. China and Italy have taken massive measures. We are taking the most suitable measures, and which are relevant to the moment when the decisions are made at each stage of this epidemic. The Health Minister, the Director General of Healthcare, first of all, communicated in a very transparent way on the situation and the relevant decisions. Today, there's no need to take decisions of that kind. If in the future we will have to take those decisions, we will explain them and we will take them. But today we have taken, in the areas that have been the most affected, where the epidemic has progressed greatly, we have taken some measures of constraint. In some counties, departments, we have decided to close schools. In some counties or departments, we have decided to forbid all public gatherings. And in the rest of the country, we have taken more proportional measures because the epidemic hasn't reached the same level of intensity. All depends on the nature and on the change, the evolution in the epidemic. We must accept that this doctrine must adapt. Today, for France, it's not necessary to go further than what we have decided on today. That's what was decided on today. This European Council meeting was very important. It will be followed by other meetings. One last point, which caused a lot of commentary, quite rightly. You may have seen that in several European airports, some companies have been flying planes that are almost empty. That's an economic heresy, but it's also an ecological and environmental heresy. Those planes were flying in order not to lose the availability of the air slots. The European Commission will make the necessary decisions to say that these air slots will be preserved for the companies to enable them not to fly their planes empty when they're empty planes when there aren't enough passengers. I think it's a common sense measure, and I would like to thank the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, for having taken the decision. This also meets what we are experiencing, and it shows that in this crisis we are experiencing, we must continue to focus on the ecological fight. What we are experiencing is a real global crisis, a worldwide, which calls for European and international cooperation. And there will be other crises in the future that we will have to face. So we mustn't forget all our priorities and our ecological agenda. Today's meeting cannot replace all meetings, human contact, exchanges, even beyond physical face-to-face meetings. This will be something that will enhance responsiveness, and indeed it's relevant from a healthcare point of view and from an environmental point of view. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.